Hi, everyone, and welcome to the last class in the spring 2023 semester. And today's topic, we're going to be talking about leadership. So some of you have been wondering, maybe wondering, what we mean by leadership, right? And let's think back to when early in the semester we were talking about how generally people assume that leadership is an innate trait, something that is already within the person that has been assigned to this position in this organization. However, us as behavior analysts, right, we want to talk about everything in sense of behavior, environment, relations. We know that leadership, as well as many other things, are in fact a skill set, right? They're operant behaviors that can be taught to people. And why is this important? It's because leaders, right, once you have that skill set, you're able to successfully maneuver and change the environment, right, in ways that you can promote and influence behavior that you know are going to be beneficial to the person and to the organization, which are again is going to show its effects on the results, right, on those key pinpointed results that are geared toward achieving the accomplishments of the organization. That's where we're going to see the effects of leadership, effective leadership. So the leaders create an environment for the next group of leaders who impact the next group, who impacts the next group, all the way down to the performers. Knowledge of a behavioral science is important at all these levels, and knowing something about the downstream impact of your behavior then allows you to set up the right environment for the behaviors to continue. As leaders in the organization and leaders in safety, first you have to identify those behaviors and then you have to be able to measure them, right? And it's also important not to only do this with the employees, but with yourself, especially if you're in that leadership position and you're trying to develop and accumulate these leadership skills. And Daniels, and he's famously said, leadership is evidenced in the behavior of the followers. So in Daniels, I want to say it's one of his popular business books, talks about how, again, leadership is not an innate trait, but rather a set of behaviors, right? And he says that an effective leader is able to have employees emit something that he calls discretionary behavior. And basically, what he means by that is that discretionary behavior is when your employees, or even just one or two, are willing to go above and beyond the call of duty, right? Then they're above and beyond what they're regularly scheduled to do, assigned to do, in order to benefit the leader and the organization, right? Because you can imagine if a leader is able to establish the conditions for a worker to be able to emit such a kind of behavior in those circumstances, he's doing something right, right? And he's probably doing it, especially if the employees are willingly emitting these high effortful behaviors, he's doing it in a positive and constructive manner. And so Judy Komaki and other researchers developed something that was called the Operant Superior Taxonomy and Index, which basically created a list that was of different categories of supervisory behaviors that were found to be effective. Some of these supervisory behaviors include performance monitoring, performance antecedents, performance consequences, monitoring their own performance as a leader, work-related and non-work-related aspects, communication, and solitary aspects. So two specific examples that we're going to dive into is performance monitors, such as work sampling, self-report, and secondary sources, as well as consequences, such as direct or indirect, right? Positive, neutral, and negative. Things that we've kind of talked about already throughout the course in organizational behavior management. So in one study, Judy Komaki and others had a hypothesis, right? They wondered if monitoring and consequences would be the two effective categories that would help them distinguish between effective and marginal managers. So a particular type of monitoring, work sampling, would distinguish effective and marginal managers. By that, right, or if the supervisor is actually on the floor looking and assessing right? Measuring whether their behavior is changing, and then work sampling actually being able to look and inspect the quality of the work, right? Would that differentiate effective and marginal managers? And would there be a difference in the ratio of positive and negative consequences, right? That was one of the questions. Because in theory, if we have a more effective manager, then we would have them emitting more positive rather than negative consequences. And so Judy hypothesized that the ratio of positive and negative consequences would be irrelevant. So they looked at 24 managers and they observed up to 20 times for 30 minutes for a total of 465 observations. And overall, they found that effective managers were in the top 28% of those observations, and marginal managers were in the bottom 28% as rated by their boss. And so the results suggested that monitors were distinguished effective and marginal managers. So being able to actually keep track of what's happening on the floor was a vital behavior. Among those things that were done, work sampling was the most important type of monitor, right? Actually looking and evaluating the quality of the work that's being produced turned out to be super important. And as predicted in the hypothesis, positive and negative consequences didn't seem to matter, right? Probably because the consequences by itself, right, can be sufficient to change behavior, whether those are, positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement, positive feedback, or constructive feedback. In another study by Komaki et al. In 1986, they conducted another set of sessions where they looked at 189 30-minute observations of 7 theater managers over a period of 5 weeks, and they conducted 440 30-minute observations of bank managers over 12 weeks. And according to the Operant Supervisory Taxonomy and Index, both were acceptable. It was reliable and sensitive to differences in managers within their behaviors. Basically, what that means is that this tool, right, was able to differentiate between the various levels of skill set amongst the leaders that were observed in these two totally different areas of work, which was really cool. And approximately 20 to 30-minute observations, right? 20 individual 30-minute observations would provide a pretty representative sample, right, of the information on a given leader's work behavior, which is pretty impressive, right? Because you imagine that leadership would be something that you have to extensively study, but they showed a pretty, reasonable sample that you can take from to make evaluations on their performance. And so there have been tons of studies, right, using this OSTI, and all of them have shown that this is an effective tool in a variety of settings. So effective leaders spend more time on, again, work sampling, which means inspecting the work itself and watching employees conduct the work. Another important part that leaders should spend their time on is providing consequences, right? Because again, knowing the principles of behavior, consequences are what change the future probability of behavior. Antecedents are important, right? But again, they derive their evocative powers, right? Or for lack of a better way of saying it, from the consequences. Because the consequences, right, change the meaning, quote unquote, of the antecedents, right? It could turn it into a discriminant stimulus, it could turn it into a S delta, or it could change it into a condition aversive stimulus, right? It's all dependent on that learning history, on those consequences. So then came the development of the operant supervisory in-basket assessment. And when they say in-basket, I want you to think about inbox, right? Kind of what you would imagine a stereotypical leader has, right? In their office with their nice, furniture. So they'll have their inbox full of things that they need to do and their outbox of everything that they've completed that needs to go to other places. So it's an assessment tool that reliably measures leadership behavior in an efficient manner. And in baskets are simulations in which respondents take on the role of a manager and respond to items that a manager might find in their inbox. So this one specifically is a paper and pencil measure. And basically, it's put within the context of an editor of a monthly food magazine company. And so the participants are required to respond to items and make decisions and attempt to resolve issues created by the 16 items in their inbox. And then these items typically consist of different kinds of fictional memos, phone messages, letters, emails, etc. And then the experimenter or researcher codes the responses for things such as providing antecedents, monitoring performance, and providing consequences. And this is just one example of something that might be found in that inbox. And in Komaki et al., 1990, they used OSDI to observe, again, the behavior of 12 computer managers, and each manager was also scored using that OSIBA, the operant supervisory in-basket assessment that we just talked about. And the results suggested that the results were statistically significant between OSTI and OSIBA, right? There was that significant correlation between the results of both. So now, to kind of sort of shift gears to talk about kind of the effect that good leadership, right, could possibly have on the environment, right? So whenever we talk about something like this, we might be tempted to talk about something that's called work culture. So work culture can be defined as the shared values, beliefs, rules, assumptions, and attitudes, right, according to the traditional definition. So one way to kind of talk about it in a more behavioral lens, we could say that there are patterns of behavior that are encouraged or discouraged by people, processes, or systems over time, right? So this is kind of like what we alluded to whenever we talked about establishing a good safety culture, right? Where we promote the occurrence of safe behaviors, we discourage the occurrence of unsafe behaviors, and overall, right, keep everybody accountable and responsible to make sure that we're maintaining these contingencies that promote that safety culture. So one thing that you always want to make sure you do when you are establishing and creating a work culture, especially a good one, right? A productive one, is that you want to make sure that you're culturally responsive. So the way to do that includes expanding your network of associates, right? Because the more you encounter different people of different backgrounds, the more you are exposed to different ideas, different experiences, different learning histories, right? That they can tell you about in, excuse me, in which, they have experience and can let you know. And, you can indirectly learn from the contingencies that others have experienced, right? So then you also want to make sure that you're reflecting on your own privilege as an individual, right? There might be some areas that you're privileged in. So, for example, me with the extensive amount of schooling that I've had, I would say that I'm academically privileged, and maybe um, that can play into account, right? Whenever I'm consulting with others that might not have had the same opportunities I have to study for this long and learn this much about, a particular topic of interest. Something else that you can do is you can spend supervisory time learning about other cultures, right? Because we live in the U.S., but the U.S. is a great melting pot of all variety of different cultures. Here in Florida, you definitely see it. We have a variety of different individuals from Hispanic cultures, a different variety of peoples from different cultures in Europe, and people that have different amounts of time living in the U.S. And so all these things, right, are also existent in the world of work. So learning about these other cultures, the way that people see things, the way that people approach things are all helpful, right? Especially when we work with them in organizational settings. Something else you may want to do, is join communities of practice dedicated to inclusion and fairness, right? Because these are people that are also determined to try to live by cultural humility, cultural responsive principles, and would make it easier to teach you and to train you to be able to emit those behaviors in organizational settings. So this is just one example of different kinds of questions that you can ask yourself to learn a little bit more about, yourself, people of other cultures, people of the same culture, right? Because even though I might have things in common with somebody in my culture, um, we might still see some areas differently, right? Because there's so many subtleties that happen in people's learning histories. You can also benefit from learning from people from other cultures and even supervisors and colleagues from other cultures. And these are some questions that you could ask to, start to kind of see some of the subtle differences in responding that you might observe. So it's important to remember that organizational culture change occurs one behavior at a time, right? Just like whenever we talked about behavioral systems analysis, we always want to start from the general to the specific. We want to make sure that we aren't, trying to bite off more than we can chew. And it's always going to be a continuous improvement process, right? We're always going to take one step forward to try to fix the issue. And there might be steps that we take back, that we have to go back, right? Maybe something was not done right, something we didn't account for. And, this is just always going to be that continuous improvement process. So, cultural change process entails a couple of things, and those are identifying the ideal culture, right? So now we're not necessarily talking about people's like backgrounds. Now we're talking about how we want this organization to kind of operate, right? Like what are our values as an organization? Do we want to be adaptable? Do we want to be agile? Do we want to be engaged, team oriented, have safety focus, be scientific, etc. Okay, so you want to identify your ideal culture. And then importantly, right, just like when we talked about pinpoints, just like whenever we talk about systems analysis, right, you want to make sure that everything within the system, within the organization, is aligned toward achieving the mission, right? So the same goes for your ideal culture. So you want to make sure that the behaviors, those pinpointed behaviors, and the results are all geared toward achieving that ideal state. And the way you do this, right, once you have figured out what behaviors and results are important into achieving that, you want to make sure you measure and support those behaviors. Because, of course, you want to make sure that you are noticing differences, right, changes in that positive direction. And the only way to keep behaviors going is by providing those positive reinforcing consequences, right? And again, you might want to ask yourself what important aspects are important to you, right? What is your ideal culture for your organization? For example, when I start my consulting company someday, I would definitely have continuous learning be one of my primary ideal cultural values, as well as being, let's see, I saw it earlier. Being engaged with the people that we work with, right? We want to be very collaborative, which is another one, and we want to have fun while we're doing. So these are all things that we might try to keep into account when figuring out how we want this organization to operate. And one such example is from the Gravina lab. So Dr. Gravina, whenever I accepted my offer to join her lab and come to work with her and participate in all the awesome opportunities that she had a it was kind of like a handbook, graduate student handbook, to where I could learn about everything that is to know about her lab, her way of doing things, and things that I had to keep in mind. So one of her primary values, right, or ideals for the type of culture she wants in our lab is that she says always have a mentor and always be a mentor. So basically, the way that we do this, right, is we look at how many projects are people paired up on. Is one person more experienced? Excuse me. Is one person more experienced on the team, right? Because it might be helpful for somebody with more experience to be able to kind of lead the way for a younger, less experienced student to make sure that they're gaining the experiences that they need to be able to be more successful in the future. As far as our undergrad lab, we might make sure that and ask, are undergraduate students paired up with a graduate student on projects? What tasks are they doing? And what support are they getting? What skills are they learning? Something I always ask myself whenever I work with the different research assistants I have for a variety of projects. And when new students join the lab, how are our more senior undergrad students helping them acclimate and learn the way that we do things in the Gravina OBM lab? And then when students graduate, who do they say supported their learning, right? Because we want to make sure that if we do accept them into our lab, that we are also providing a worthwhile experience where we are actually helping them, achieve goals and get experiences that are going to help them build their future careers, right? Because excuse me, because many of our students want to end up going into graduate school. So we want to make sure that we provide experiences that are going to help them in that direction. So what are the key behaviors that support the goals and how can they be measured, right? So those are things to fundamentally think about, right? So once I've identified that I want to be agile, right? What are those key behaviors and how can they be measured? So another example, right? What are some key behaviors and results that we could use to make sure that we are open to feedback? Some of those include sending out anonymous feedback surveys, asking for feedback in meetings, responding to feedback by thanking the giver, asking directly for dissenting opinions, and acting on feedback that is provided. So you may ask, how do we measure some of these? How do we get them to occur? Again, we can send out anonymous feedback surveys, and those simply tabulate based on simple Qualtrics algorithms. You can literally keep track of how often you ask for feedback in meetings. You can do this weekly, monthly, daily, depending on what aspects you're looking for, what criteria you have. You can respond to feedback by thanking the giver. That one you can put like on a continuous FR schedule, right? You always want to be thankful because feedback is always, well, when it's good feedback, right? Even if it's constructive, if it's done well, it's meant to improve your behavior, right? To help you get better. So, it's always something to be thankful for. Asking directly for dissenting opinions, that one might be tough, right? Because from personal experience, I have, certain ways of doing things that I prefer that I've established in my graduate school days. But, going to new environments, you might be presented with others that might go about things differently. And so these are opportunities for you to learn to see if the way you do it is the most beneficial way to do it, if it's just kind of something you're used to and you're happy with. And, if you limit yourself, you might not see, the good things that other people have to offer to say about, a certain manner. And, you always want to treat those as opportunities for you to learn. And also importantly, you always want to act on feedback provided. Again, going with my previous point, if it's good feedback and it's done well, again, it's meant to help you, not hurt you. So in those cases, you want to act on that feedback because it's only going to benefit you and the organization. So generally, the way that kind of things work and kind of trickle down in an organizational setting, you have your leader, right? Let's say your top level executives that set the goals. And let's say we're talking about an autism company, right? Autism clinic. So they set the goals to improve client outcomes to a certain degree, right? And just like we talked a little bit about whenever we talked about systems analysis, where Rumble and Brock talk about how the purpose of a manager, right, supervisor, is to navigate and be able to manage the white space in an organizational chart, right? Because things can fall through the cracks very easily. And so the manager and supervisor are going to make sure that they're assessing, pinpointing, and providing feedback to the people beneath them, right? Because again, we have tiered systems of key behaviors and results that all contribute to the overall accomplishments of the organization, right? So then once we get to staff, right, the staff is going to want to make sure that they get feedback on the treatment integrity, right? Are they making sure that they're implementing interventions the way they're supposed to and the way that they're written? And then if they have any opportunities to provide feedback up toward the supervisors, managers, and leaders, that's also helpful, right? Because it opens that two-way lane of communication to make sure that, again, things don't fall through the crack and the organization is running optimally. And who benefits from this? The client, right? Because they're the ones whose outcomes improve based on the success of the organization. So again, behavioral cultural change processes. First, you want to identify your ideal culture. Then you want to link those pinpointed behaviors and results to the ideal state. Then you want to measure and support these behaviors. And lastly, you want to measure and support through the whole leadership chain, right? Again, just like we talk about in systems analysis, we want to make sure that all the measures, all the behaviors, everything within this organization is all geared toward trying to accomplish the mission of the organization, right? Because if not, then we're going to have dysfunction. We're going to have sub optimization, which is never good for the organization. So this is more based on Dr. Gravina's experiences, this particular section, not what we just talked about. But this is something she wanted me to share with y'all about the phases of culture change that she's experienced in her career as a consultant in OBM. So let's see. So first, she suggests that you first find what she calls the exemplary performers and help them. So whenever you're working on the floor, right, you're there to do BBS, right, behavior-based safety, you're going to do a systems change, you're going to do performance management, right? Just like I talked about with Gilbert, right, his definition of an exemplary performer was the person that is best able to do the job. Well, with Dr. Arena's kind of definition, it's the person, an exemplary performer are those that who do more than asked in the homework, ask for more additional readings, request coaching and input outside of the course before it's required. She suggests that they're the first people that you should teach to become great self-managers and to help them get results using behavioral tools. The reason is because you're going to help them relieve a lot of that worker frustration, and you're going to reinforce good employee behaviors on people that are already emitting discretionary behavior, right? What we started this lecture talking about, right? Well, whether people go above and beyond the call of duty. So once you've identified these people within your organization, you want to help them and show them, right, that you're a person that they can go to, and that you can influence to continue that kind of discretionary effort. So then what you want to do is you want to create these pockets of gold. So once exemplary performers start having success, everything under them gets even better. So there are people that start applying the science, right? Because it becomes more common in the organization. It becomes obvious that they are doing something special. And then others, right, want to kind of bandwagon and jump on ship, right, and be a part of that new change in the culture. And then from there, right, their techniques and ideas spread, and others want to learn about behavioral science, and their cultures start to shift in the desired direction. So again, that's just, again, from Dr. Gravina's experiences on how she's noticed that the cultural changes, and one strategy that she tries to implement to make sure that the ideal cultural change happens in an effective way within the organization. Okay, everyone, so that is it for today's lecture. And again, that was the last lecture of the semester, which means that congratulations, you're completely done with this course in organizational behavior management. And so before I let y'all go, I just kind of wanted to tell y'all that my goals at the beginning of this class, right, before the semester started, was first and foremost, I wanted to introduce y'all to the wonderful world of OBM, all the awesome assessment tools, interventions, right? And everything that comes with being an organizational behavior manager, learning about systems analysis, and what this career could look like if you decide to kind of, continue down this path. And hopefully I did a good job at that. And then my secondary goal was to help y'all continue to build your understanding of the principles of behavior. This one was a lot more of a personal goal for me, especially as I've gained experience in teaching. Again, this was been my third or fourth class taught at the undergraduate level. And just personally and from experience, ever since I was an undergrad and then in my graduate program and now in my PhD, my understanding of the principles have always helped me really understand and get deep into the fundamentals of behavior analysis, and that's only benefited me in that it helps me understand and learn about all the variety of different applications, right? OBM, clinical, even like the more mental health oriented research that's happening. And it just gives you such a thorough background that you realize that, again, the root behind all these very cool applications of behavior always lie in how those principles of behavior, right? The laws of behavior operate. So hopefully, I helped y'all learn a little bit more about those principles, their importance, and y'all continue to, dig deep and learn about them as you progress through your behavior analytic careers. Next, I just wanted y'all to know that y'all have my email, so always feel free to reach out if y'all ever have any questions about OBM, right? If there's anything in particular about this class, any of the specific procedures, systems analysis that, piqued your interest, that you want advice on how to dig more into, get more involved, again, feel free to reach out. Same thing about behavior analysis, because as you probably know by now, that's something I love talking even in my free time about. So again, don't feel free to reach out, and also graduate school, because I know, especially for my background, graduate school was never something that I was really exposed to when I was growing up. I honestly didn't really know the difference between like a master's degree and a PhD, other than it was important for people to go to college, and that's that. And so I had a lot of wonderful graduate students, right, that were above me, right, when I was an undergrad, that taught me and told me everything I needed to know, right, in preparation of what could potentially be my career in behavior analysis. And now I'm willing and wanting to return the favor to you all. So if anything ever comes up, any questions about graduate school, feel free to let me know. And finally, again, sincerely, thank you, everyone. I really, really enjoyed this class, getting the opportunity to teach all about OBM and behavior analysis. And I hope, wish you the best in your future endeavors. Have a great summer. And, again, I'm always here. So if anything comes up, let me know. But again, thank you, everyone. Have a great summer and live your best life.